braver. Life has no limits. When you stand back and you look at your life, it can seem like a movie. It can play like a movie. A movie where you are the main character. You can't change the past, but you certainly have control of what your future can look like. My movie is like a roller coaster. It has it all. The highs and lows, the ups and downs, the twists and turns, you name it. Each one of you can probably see your life in a similar way as well. But I've been fortunate to have risen each time higher after each phase. And what I'd like to do today is share some of those insights with a hope that every time you get onto your own roller coaster ride, you come up higher each time and you leave that legacy behind. So climb aboard while I revisit my journey and I share what I've learned along the way. Scene 1. My first clip takes me back to when I was 7. I had a very carefree childhood. And I believed in every Disney movie I watched. I believed that life was meant to be happy. I was very close to my grandparents, especially my grandmom. Ignore the hairdo. But she taught me to be myself. She taught me to be my own person, to be independent. She always said, you can achieve anything you set your heart on. When I was growing up, it was a very different time for women to choose jobs over being at home, because women had a role to nurture, to bear children, to cook. And my grandmom always told me, break the glass ceiling, cut that noise out. That's not what you're meant to do. But when I was 14, I had a bit of a twist in my life, a sudden change. And by this time, I had 2 younger siblings who were 8 and 10 years younger to me. It was a time when I knew that my parents had started to drift off a little bit. But then they suddenly announced that they were going to go their separate ways. Now, from seeing them completely and madly in love to hearing this news, it really hit me. It did. But it's okay. These things happen, right? And I had no idea what to do next. All sorts of questions about what happens now to my siblings, to myself, to our lives. How would it be now? Dad flew with an airline, so that kept him away very often. And Mum decided to move away. And that's when I realized that I made my first bold decision in life. I made a choice. A choice to play the role of a parent to my siblings, in whichever capacity I could. I suddenly started looking at my siblings as my own children, perhaps due to the age difference. But a choice all the same to be there for them, their needs, their expectations. And so what should have been teenage years of going to college and having outings and hanging out with friends soon turned to picking them up from school or dropping them for a class or sitting and doing their homework and assignments, a lot of times at the cost of my own assignments, because I was also a student at the time. But the one thing I remember telling myself is that yes, as a family, we are going through this whole crisis, this new whole phase. But I won't let the kids or myself lose sight of what we have to achieve. I wanted to stay true to what my grandmom taught me. And so I learned to be bold, to take decisions and to make some very, very important decisions and choices, to be accountable, no matter what age or what time. All that matters is that how you face that decision and that challenge, every ounce of energy and dedication, and how you gave it your 100% each time. When I was speaking to my mentor recently, he asked me, who asked you to do all of this? And you know what? The answer is no one. I made those choices out of love for the ones I love. And I continue to make these choices today. But the only difference is I've learned to put myself first sometimes, because that's okay as well. Scene 2. The story goes on, and my movie's still playing, guys. Somehow, through all of this, I kept up with my education. But the journey wasn't easy. You know, we have some very interesting people in our lives, in our friend circles and extended families, who love to be nosy. They love to pick on where it hurts the most. I was no different. They'd ask me these random questions. What will happen to the three of you now? Who will accept you? Mind you, accept being the imperative word. What will happen to your future after such a horrendous thing? Did these questions scare me? No. I became even more determined to beat the odds. And so if Dad was flying, I'd be the one winding down our day. And I'd get the kids to say, which I'm sure they don't remember today, some affirmations that I started back then. We said every night, I will not let anyone decide my fate or my future. And I will achieve anything I set my heart on. It was just a mission I set for us. And it paid off. Because on the professional side, I landed myself my very first job, my entry into the corporate world with one of the big four of consulting. It was a very big deal for me. And so what I didn't realize was as I was taking these bold decisions, I kept pushing my benchmarks and I was building resilience within myself to not accept your lot, to challenge yourself or the situation if the need arose. At the time, if I'm honest, it came from a lot of anger and a place of vengeance, to give it back to all of those noisemakers who were asking me those questions. But I did learn to confront what I was facing. I was pushing myself, and my attitude became, let's figure it, no matter what. So let's move on to scene 3. Despite having this amazing start to my career, my best friend and I, in that picture, I love her to bits, we quit our jobs, and we decided to come here to the UK and study our master's at Warwick Business School in marketing and strategy. For some reason, I just fell in love with the concept of building brands and being creative. So time for some good news. At the end of that year, I landed myself a job at a global FMCG giant that was paying me £48,000 as a starting salary. Life is good, right? A 22-year-old with that kind of package? Not just quite. Because here's the bad news. The year was 2008, the year of the financial global crisis. So there's me, a 22-year-old, with this dream job lined up, only to be withdrawn. And I didn't have a job, out of the blue. While this was happening on the career front, things just got a bit more worse at home, because somewhere the same girl hoped people would just figure it out at home. They'd just figure a way to work it out. But it didn't happen. And they decided to sign the papers to get the big D, D-I-V-O-R-C-E, divorce. So I found myself at yet another crossroad. What do I do now? Should I figure it, like I said before, and stick around in the UK and see how I land myself yet another job? Or do I fly back home to be with the kids and my family? I chose again to put my family first. And the next thing I knew is I was on a plane back to India. But that choice, my friends, came with a very difficult and heavy consequence. I had a £20,000 loan, a student loan, yet to be paid. I had to take whatever job was available in this recession environment and beat this. From the £48,000 a year as a starting package, I accepted a job that paid me £2,000 a year. You know how much that is on a monthly basis? £180 a month. That was tough. And I was angrier, and I was in more pain, and I felt more lost, and I was too ashamed to talk about what was happening with me, personally and professionally. And in my head, guys, I also started feeling less worthy of myself, less accepted with my friends, in my relationships, and I let the noise get to me. And that's when I started writing. I wrote and wrote and wrote, I don't know how many pages, of pain and failure and love and relationships and this ideal world that I was building in my head. And so I became more aware of myself, of my feelings and what I was going through. I know I wasn't going through something good at all. The struggles were very real, and I had a total disregard for myself. But this also became the start of a journey I'd like to call healing, because I learned who my friends were in the toughest of times. Scene 4. My movie goes on, and as time went by, I kept climbing the corporate ladder. I worked with some amazing brands, built some amazing teams and marketing campaigns. But on the personal front, my relationships were getting even more strained. Somewhere along the line, I started blaming everybody for what had happened and for dumping this on us. I can now look at this objectively today and say, coming back to India and accepting that 180-pound job a month was my choice, not theirs. They didn't influence that. But at the time, I was a heartbroken 20-something who thought I'd lost my parents, which I didn't. They were still very much around. And I lost my best friend, my mum. So what this taught me was yet another lesson. What was it that was just my anchor and something that kept me going? It was my values. I'm born in a traditional Hindu household, as you can tell. And so prayer and faith are a very normal part of my life. And my values about trust and commitment and putting family first, loving without boundaries, loyalty became my compass. And what I also realized was it kept me grounded. I also realized they defined me. And the people who were really with me at the time were my true friends. So throughout my life, if you decided right now to open your LinkedIns and look me up, you'd say, well, she's done all right. But now you know a little bit more about that journey. I've built some amazing relationships in the 16 years now that I have worked. And if you looked at my WhatsApp right now, you would find groups all the way from my school, uni, college days, projects that I've worked on, conversations with very senior people in the industry, and each of them I've kept in touch with. And I asked myself this question: how is it that we still have this relationship? How is it that it's still so meaningful? And the answer is empathy. Because I had it so tough. I've always tried to my level best to think of someone else and put myself in their shoes if I could. Be it a family person, a friend or a colleague, or even sometimes my demanding bosses, because they too have pressures, right? But you know what? When I was that 20-something, I would have loved to have someone like this in my life. Someone who just listened. Someone who was listening to understand. Who was there to just tell me, you're doing okay. I know it's not easy. The world is constantly changing. And the world needs leaders who are empathetic to nurture the leaders of tomorrow. So when I look at this, I said, great. We have a model, BRAVE. Because you have to be bold sometimes. You have to make those choices. Don't hold back. Because B for bold makes you R for resilient. But remember that resilience is a journey. It's the circumstances and it's your situations that build you. There will be the highs and lows. What you are doing at Warwick today is just one of the many, many chapters of your life. But know your anchor and what to fall back on when the chips are low. A for aware. Be aware of your own needs. Be aware of your own self. Also aware of what hurts and when it's okay to ask for help. Respect yourself and have values. That's what the V is for. Learn to be authentic. You don't have to fit a mold. Just be your own person. You don't have to be somebody else. And make your values your foundation pillars of everything you do. And finally, have a heart. Try and put yourself in someone else's shoes, even if it's just for a minute. In this very room, my friends, everybody is going through something. But acknowledge that despite that, they're showing up. Acknowledge that despite that, they are standing tall. But you know what? The model isn't just quite there yet. At the height of my career 2 years ago, I decided to leave a very senior position to reinvent myself. I quit my job, I sold my house, I took on an MBA back at Warwick Business School, and I finally published the 200 plus poems into a book called Verses and Sonnets Freshly Brewed. And so I'd like to add the final R to my model, reinvent. Because remember, each of us is a diamond waiting to be cut and polished. Remember that the most beautiful stones are not the biggest, but the ones that shine the brightest. Remember that they take the hard hits. They are rough on the edges, and each stone has its journey. So don't just be another stone. Don't leave that legacy. Be braver in today's world. I'd just like to quote one line that I published in this book of mine. Be your own silver lining. I realize that I'm polishing away because I'm not done, and neither are you. So be braver. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a real pleasure to be here.